Today, we're diving into a conflict that didn't just redraw battle lines, it completely rewrote the rulebook for modern warfare in South Asia. We're talking about Operation Sindoor.
So take a look at this. This really sets the stage for a totally new kind of conflict. Back in May of 2025, the long-simmering tensions between India and Pakistan, they didn't just boil over into a traditional war. No, this was something different. It was a multi-front battle fought on the ground, sure, but also in the air and, this is the key part, in cyberspace and across the global economy. This was Operation Sindoor, and it all started with a single deadly spark.
You know, every conflict has a trigger point, right? A flashpoint. For Operation Sindoor, it was a truly brutal act of terror in the Kashmir Valley.
26. On April 22, 2025, this number, it became a rallying cry. A horrific terrorist attack in Pahalgam, a popular tourist town in Jammu and Kashmir, took the lives of 26 civilians.
And this image, it just shows some of the devastation. What we know is that the attackers specifically went after male tourists, even separating them from their families before the attack. Almost immediately, the Resistance Front, which is an offshoot of the Pakistan-based group Lashkar-e-Taiba, claimed they were responsible. And just like that, this single act of violence became the spark that would ignite a swift and incredibly powerful response.
So, the big question is, how did India respond? Well, it wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction. It was with a meticulously planned, multi-pronged military campaign, a campaign called Operation Sindoor.
Okay, this timeline really shows you just how fast everything escalated. I mean, look at this. The attack happens on April 22nd. By May 7th, India launches Operation Sindoor. Just 3 days later, Pakistan retaliates. And then, and this is wild, by the end of that same day, May 10th, a ceasefire's already in place. It was this incredibly intense but remarkably short military conflict.
And make no mistake, this was no minor border skirmish. The sheer scope of the operation tells you that. Operation Sindoor was this massive, coordinated effort between the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, hitting 9 separate sites. And these targets weren't just on the border. They were spread all the way from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir deep into Pakistan's Punjab province, aiming right at infrastructure linked to groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba.
From a tech standpoint, this operation was basically a showcase of some seriously advanced weaponry. India rolled out long-range Scalp cruise missiles, Hammer precision bombs, and, for the very first time, what are called loitering munitions, suicide drones. But here's the really critical part. So many of these systems, like the BrahMos missile and the Akashtir air defense system, were developed right there in India. This was a huge statement, a major leap forward for India's defense self-reliance.
Now, in any conflict, you're going to get two very different stories, and this was no exception. On one side, you have India's claim that their strikes were surgical, they were precise, they were non-escalatory, and they only targeted terrorist infrastructure, killing over 100 terrorists. Then you have Pakistan's claim that the Indian strikes actually hit civilian areas, including mosques, and killed 31 civilians. This war of narratives is just as important as the physical battle, and it's a key feature of modern conflict.
But here's where it gets even more interesting. The missile strikes, the drones, that was only one piece of the puzzle. Operation Sindoor was designed from the ground up to be a multi-front conflict that went way, way beyond the physical battlefield.
And to really get what happened next, you have to understand this term, non-kinetic efforts. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. These are powerful actions a country can take to achieve its goals without firing a shot. Think of them as economic and diplomatic weapons designed to apply immense pressure.
And in this case, India unleashed a whole series of these non-kinetic actions, one right after another. First, they suspended the decades-old Indus Waters Treaty. Then they closed the main land border crossing at Atariwaga. They suspended all bilateral trade. They revoked visas for Pakistani nationals, and they even banned cultural exchanges with Pakistani artists. Every single one of these steps was carefully chosen to isolate Pakistan and impose real, tangible costs, both economically and diplomatically.
And this quote, which came directly from the Indian government, just powerfully sums up the feeling behind one of the biggest moves, suspending that 1960 Indus Waters Treaty. Blood and water cannot flow together. I mean, it's a crystal clear message that diplomatic and economic cooperation just wasn't on the table in the face of terrorism.
Meanwhile, there was a whole other war being fought completely in the shadows online. A Pakistani-linked hacking group, known as APT-36, which just stands for Advanced Persistent Threat, launched this really sophisticated cyber campaign targeting Indian networks. And get this, some of these attacks had started even before the Pahalgam incident. On top of that, both sides went all in on an intense information war, throwing everything at each other. Doctored footage, AI-generated deepfakes, you name it, all to shape public opinion. India's strategy was interesting. They focused less on pushing their own narrative and more on just discrediting the sources of the misinformation.
So, after all of this, the military strikes, the economic pressure, the cyber war, what was the ultimate result? Well, the aftermath of this short and tense conflict created a totally new strategic reality for the entire region.
So officially, the fighting stopped with a ceasefire on May 10th. But, like a lot of these agreements, it was pretty fragile. In the days that followed, both India and Pakistan were already accusing each other of violations.
From India's point of view, though, Operation Sindoor hit several key strategic targets. First and foremost, it established a brand new red line. The message was loud and clear. Any future terror attacks would be met with a direct and forceful military response, period. India also claimed to have taken out 9 terror camps and successfully showed off its homegrown military tech. And, just as importantly, they achieved a crucial diplomatic goal, framing the whole thing purely as a counter-terrorism action, totally separate from the long-standing Kashmir dispute.
And this analysis here from the Observer Research Foundation, a major strategic think tank, really just nails the perceived shift. The core takeaway was that the old playbook was dead. The entire operation was designed to make one thing absolutely clear. Sponsoring cross-border terrorism against India was no longer, as they put it, a cost-free option.
And that brings us to the final, and maybe the most critical question of all. Look, Operation Sindoor definitely seems to have redrawn the rules of engagement. It showed off a new, much more assertive military doctrine, advanced tech, and a real willingness to strike deep inside an adversary's territory. But it also brings up a pretty sobering thought. In a region with 2 nuclear-armed nations, changing the rules of the game is an incredibly high-stakes gamble. So the question that now hangs over South Asia is this: how far can one side really push before crossing a line that can't be uncrossed?